And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, March 25th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So, we are going to start off the show, talk a little bit about the NFL draft. We'll talk about Cam Ward's Pro Day. We'll talk about who is going to go number one overall. And it seems like it's going to be Cam Ward. And he feels like it's going to be him. So we will get into that in just a second. Then in the second part of the show, we're going to talk about March Madness, but there's definitely been some complaints with the tournament and how there are individuals out there that believe this might be the worst tournament in a while. And we're going to kind of debunk that and say that's not true. But we will get into that in the second part of the show. We will also talk more about Aaron Rodgers and if he made a mistake leaving Green Bay, because now it's being reported that with his next team, he wants there to be a Green Bay-like culture, according to reports. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about baseball starting this week. I know it started last week, technically, but everybody else starts on Thursday. So some headlines, some injury news that I wanted to get into, and we'll preview the games on Thursday because pretty much all the pitching matchups are set. I think the Dodgers, I know, is still to be determined, but I think they have a starter on Thursday. We'll take a look at that in the fourth part of the show as well. And then in the final part of the show, continue my season overviews, and today we will be covering the Cincinnati Bengals. And then we'll take a look at what they've done in the offseason so far. I mean, really, they have gone all in to re-sign their guys, but we'll get into it. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the NFL draft. So the NFL draft is about a month away, and it's really starting to ramp up because you're hearing all these different reports from different sources and, you know, executives talking and coaches talking and things like that, and where, you know, certain players can end up, mock drafts, you know, analysts doing mock drafts. So we really haven't talked about the NFL draft. Now, the main thing, and the thing that's going to start off the draft, is the number one overall pick. Who is going to end up going with the first pick? Now, we talked about this earlier in the offseason that maybe the Titans, who have the pick, could trade out. And you see one of these other teams like the Giants, the Browns potentially, maybe the Raiders, you know, one of these teams potentially trades with them and gets that pick. Well, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen the way things are right now. And it could all be a smokescreen because earlier in the offseason you had the Titans saying that they intention is to take a generational talent. Now, your definition of generational might be different from their definition because maybe they feel that Cam Ward is generational. But when you think of generational, I mean, for me, I'm thinking of Abdul Carter, how people have him ranked. I'm thinking of Travis Hunter, what he brings to the table. That's what I'm thinking. And when you look at this quarterback class, everybody I talk to and everything you hear in general, this draft class is not generational. So now you're thinking, well, yeah, could the Titans trade out? But it seems like they could be dead set on taking a quarterback. Now, would I be surprised if they trade out or they don't take a quarterback? No, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think that's where they're leaning towards, if I were to guess. Because you got this new coaching staff. Now, they were in place last year too. You know, they tried to get more out of Will Levis. And we talked about that a lot on the football podcast. You know, they went out and they signed Calvin Ridley. They signed Tyler Boyd. They signed Tony Pollard. They drafted a left tackle. They did things to try and improve this offense and put Will Levis in a position where he was going to thrive in year 2, and that just did not happen. He was a turnover machine, and he was basically, unfortunately for him, he was basically a meme every week because there was always an image of him coming out of each game. So, yeah, um, that wasn't great for Will Levis. And then eventually, he got benched, then he gets put back in. It was the quarterback situation for the Titans was a mess last year. Because Mason Rudolph had to come in. Well, he got hurt, Will Levis, and then Mason Rudolph came in. But then there was that game against who was it? The Bengals, I think. That was just a complete mess. And then Rudolph had to come in. But yeah, they need a quarterback, and I think they want to hit the reset button. Callahan, I think, wants to have his own guy, so it could be Cam Ward. And Cam Ward recently had his pro day, and the Titans, they had their scouts there, and it could end up being him. Now, he basically declared that, hey, I'm going to be the first pick. I think there's a quote in the article that I have. Yeah. So he basically said in an NFL Network interview, I said I'm solidifying it today. They know what they said. I made sure they heard me. And they top executives and coaches took him to dinner on Sunday. Now, obviously, that's regular procedure, I guess you could say, because teams do that with prospects. So I think the Giants also were in attendance. Actually, the Browns were not there. No Andrew Berry, no Kevin Stefanski. So that should tell you, maybe the Browns might not be taking a quarterback. And we've talked about that so much recently with some of the moves that have been made. Are the Browns going to take a quarterback? I mean, they could be taking Abdul Carter to pair with Myles Garrett. They could maybe even take Travis Hunter. You really don't know. But if the Browns sign a veteran quarterback, they are not going to draft one. Anthony in the chat, what is going on? He says, when you look at both the top 2 safeties in this year's draft, Malachi Starks and the one from South Carolina, who do you think is the better fit in Anthony Weaver's defense in Miami? I would have to go and look. Sorry I have to say that, because there's a ton of players that I am not too familiar with. So I would have to I'd have to go and take a look at that, and also see where their projections are as well. But yeah, I mean, defense. I will say this though, when it comes to the Dolphins, defense is definitely an area where you suspect they are going to address, because they have the receivers. I mean, could they take another running back in the draft to back up Achane? They could, but you could find that later in the draft. Maybe offensive line, but obviously they're loaded at receiver. Tight end could be addressed, but Jonnu Smith had a good year last year. So he also says, I think Tennessee is going to trade down. I'm sticking to that. I don't think they'd like the quarterbacks as much as people think. They're just saying that to get a team who's more desperate to trade up. That is definitely a strong possibility. Because like I said before, everything could be a smokescreen. You got to have an open mind that things could be a smokescreen. And the Giants maybe trade up. Now, I'm hoping the Giants don't do that. I hope the Giants kind of sit where they are, see how the first 2 picks go, see how the rest of this free agency period goes, because if Russell Wilson ends up signing with the Browns are not taking a quarterback. So you could say, all right, well, if they take Abdul Carter, if they take Travis Hunter, we'll take a quarterback. I got to be honest, though, I kind of want Travis Hunter over a quarterback, and then take the risk of trying to get a younger quarterback in the later rounds. But I know a lot of Giant fans don't want to do that. So for me, I'd be okay with them taking Travis Hunter and then signing Russ, and then maybe you draft a quarterback in the later round. That's how I see it. Anthony says, if Tennessee stays there, I think they draft Travis Hunter. I mean, maybe, and then maybe they take a quarterback in the later rounds. I don't know. But I don't think they're going to go into next year with Will Levis as their starter. Now, they could go in and bring somebody else in. Well, they did bring in Brandon Allen, and he knows Callahan's system. He started last year for the 49ers, that one game against the Packers, but they're not going to go in next year with Brandon Allen. Unless maybe they do and they just figure, all right, we're just going to punt on this season and tank. And because the following year the QB class is loaded. So we'll see what happens. And then also, we're hearing things with Deion Sanders and how, he wants his son to ultimately end up in New York. And you know what? I would be okay with Shedeur Sanders. I would be okay with Cam Ward. And we've talked about Shedeur Sanders a lot in our production meetings and how he could definitely handle New York. And listen, I would be all for it. If they draft him, I don't think it'd be as egregious as taking Daniel Jones with the number 6 overall pick back in 2019. But I do think that Shedeur Sanders can sit. You have Jameis start, or if you bring in another quarterback, they start. Well, I mean, if they draft Shedeur Sanders, to me, that means they probably didn't bring in another quarterback. Because you have Tommy DeVito, you got Jameis, you have Jameis start, the beginning of the year, and then you transition to Shedeur Sanders. Ideally, in a perfect world, that's how you see it, but with the way the Giants have been, you never know. Anthony also in the chat says, the Patriots are trading Joe Milton apparently. How about Tennessee trading for Milton? Maybe it's that is also a possibility. That is also a possibility. I think they're looking for like a second or a third round pick for Milton. Even if I'm the Giants, I would do that. Maybe. But that could definitely happen. He also said, I'm still thinking Sanders goes to the Raiders, not New York. It's possible. It's possible. I think if he slips out of the top 3, which I don't think is going to happen. I do think the Raiders, they could jump on that opportunity to try and get him. Unless, they say we're going to wait till next year and they continue to add to their offense because they definitely need more. But we'll see. But let me know what you guys think. Who do you think goes first overall? Do you think that it will be Cam Ward, or do you think that something crazy is going to happen that we don't see coming? The Titans straight out? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about March Madness. We'll talk about some fans being disappointed with the tournament so far. So we'll get into that when we return from our first break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.